Hello, let's talk about The Skin We're In, A Year of Black Resistance and Power by Desmond Cole, a 2020 collection of essays all centering around 1 year in Desmond Cole's life, in the life of black people in Canada, and of Canada itself, of generally of how Canada organizes itself around race, specifically in this case black around black Canadians. And yeah, so Desmond Cole is a journalist, activist, broadcaster, author, obviously, and he starts off the year at New Year learning about one more kind of shitty thing that's happening. We go through a lot of different issues, different things of the year. I think carding is one of the big ones. This is all sort of centered around Toronto, with little visits to different various other parts of the country. But yeah, Toronto, Ontario seems to be where the main focus is, probably because that's where indeed Desmond Cole is based out of. Though was born on the prairies, apparently. Um, so yeah, we start off with the idea of carding, which he in a article in, I think it was Toronto Life, exposed this practice. Not exposed, but brought it to greater national prominence. The practice of police doing random stop checks on primarily people of color, Indigenous people. You know, why are you in this neighborhood? What's your name? Let me see your identification, and just stopping them continuously over and over again in a way that, not surprisingly, if you got stopped regularly every day by police and were questioned and had to produce papers, you would probably feel intimidated, threatened, and knowing that in any one of these situations, if you did something that was slightly wrong, the police could react, and oftentimes do seem to react and really overreact. This is a process. This is something that you see, and this is where you get into the kind of clueless white guy that I am. Does this happen in BC? How would I know? I am a white guy. And unless I actually pay attention to the news, I wouldn't know. So we go from stuff like that. He actually does. He is actually, because he is such a loud and prominent voice in this, he gets plucked up by the Toronto Star and becomes a columnist. Which, if you know the newspaper business, that is the plum. That is the big job. That is the plum job. You can get that job. And if you're good and you can stick around long enough, that could be like a lifelong thing where you get a platform where you get to opine on a weekly basis on whatever you want to choose to do. What happens though is that, like a lot of columnists, he has a lot of very strong opinions on stuff and wants to agitate for them. Continues to be an activist at the same time, where he's going to the Toronto police board meetings and protesting about practices of the police. And these all get detailed in here. He gets arrested and gets released, but stuff like that. But what happens is that the Toronto Star suddenly goes, "Oh, we want you to sign he's not a staff writer. We want you to sign these other papers here, saying that you agree not to do any more activism on the job." And he's like, "What the hell?" And he notes that there are various other white columnists who are doing activism and stuff like that, and they don't seem to be constrained under the same thing. And there's also some questions like, could you stop talking about carding so much in your videos? Could you, in your not videos, in your videos, in your columns, do things up? And he says, like, I looked back through my columns. I'd done 26 columns, and only 2 of them had been about carding specifically. So he gets all this stuff. Basically, there's an ultimatum, and he's like, and he says no. He gets cut down to, instead of once a week, it's every other week. So his income gets cut in half, and the pressure continues. At which point he just says, "No, I'm not doing this. I'm not caving to pressure," and he walks away from the job. And there definitely was people who were saying you should go along to get along. Don't give up this great job. Don't give up this big platform. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that if I'm going to compromise my ideals here. And I mean, he's definitely an idealistic guy he's fairly righteous. He's a really good shit disturber. So he does quit, and he says he finds that this is something that people will stop him on the street. Black people will stop him on the street and say, "Way to go! That was it. You didn't give in. Awesome. We're so proud of you." Which is what you can tell. That's where he's getting his sustenance from. He is really good in this book of, people can have like, this is my issue is kind of it's anti-black, anti-racism against black people, and that can be your narrow focus. He seems to be really cognizant of, no, this is a part of a wider scope of things in how Canada is set up, noting especially that Canada is a colonial creation, and that that Canadians, that the settlers, which I'm a part of, we came into this country, and we shoved Native people off of their land through force, through just sheer numbers, through coercion, through lying, through treaties, all this stuff that we did to marginalize these people, and indeed try and exterminate them. And he says, like, and he's cognizant of, like, his people, which I believe his family originally came from, like, the Caribbean somewhere. I don't have all my facts at my fingertips, but were slaves that were transported to these islands, and then ended up going, and then just that they are also product of this same colonial system, and the same colonial mindset that gets applied to the Native people, Indigenous people in Canada, also gets applied to black people, regardless of actually whether they were slaves or freed slaves, loyalists from the United States who faced horrible racism in the eastern provinces when they came up, and were basically driven out that way. All this different stuff. So he's like, there's a common struggle there, and that there's a whole process of decolonization that needs to happen, which involves Native people and black people, and primarily white Canadians, to educate themselves and to decolonize them. We all need to decolonize ourselves, not just one group. He also goes into specific struggles within the gay community, the LGBTQ plus community, where there's been a certain kind of, with the ascent of a lot of rights for gay people in general, there's a lot of very now comfortable white gay people who sort of have invited in corporate sponsorship in something like the Gay Pride Parade, and have thus tried to marginalize a lot of groups of color who that hasn't happened yet, and they've gotten out, and they've forgotten. There's a sort of a charge here that they've forgotten their things, and he documents some various events where they've gotten marginalized, moved over into a parking lot, forced to have forced to have a liquor license, which the big thing about having a liquor license, if you're people of color, is suddenly you've got to show ID again, and it becomes another surveillance thing that is something that gets, I did not think about this as a white person, it gets used as surveillance against you. You get policing again. The other big thing with the Gay Pride Parade is having these corporations and police departments getting to claim that they're doing something good by participating in something like Gay Pride, which especially the people of color, indigenous people, and black indigenous and black gay people do not feel that safety, and having fully uniformed armed officers marching in parades is not something that they are comfortable with, and is not getting taken into account by the larger majority white gay community. So it's just, it's interesting how general white community can be shitty, and yes, that can happen also for, even within a minority that still is dominated by white people again. So that's, it's these things that you don't think about. He goes through a whole bunch of stuff about immigration, and definitely very much the history of immigration. I know from my own experience, my own family, that my father talked about how when he immigrated from Scotland, that there was question on his thing about what race are you, because that was something that mattered. Even this was in the 60s, but even more so further back, about exactly who we're going to accept. And that we take in migrant workers to work here, but not going to let them have any actual citizenship. We're just going to extract their labor and then kick them back out of the country again, using them and paying them less because of this, under horrible conditions, and just all the things of having children who have come into the country and for whatever reason have ended up as wards of the state, have gotten churned into the system, where the system isn't interested in making them actually into citizens. So you get full-grown adults who've lived here all their lives, have no idea of their country of origin anymore, and they get in trouble with the law because they've been through the system, and they become a system kid. They become an adult who just ends up doing bad things, and suddenly Canada goes, oh yeah, it's not our problem, we're going to deport them to whatever country that they originally came from when they were like 3 or 4 years old. It's just disgusting. Definitely a thing in here of Desmond Cold distinguishing how he does not want to work within the system, a group that seems to have been created for sort of to be help grease the Liberal Party, the ruling Liberal parties at the moment, their machinations, like, oh look, we're doing something good, we're working with these people, which are rich, powerful people of color. I think it's the former Governor General who's set up this organization, and you have like powerful judges and thing like that. It's like, these are people who have worked. They might be people of color, but they're doing great in the system. And so when you put them in charge of trying to help, trying to improve things, they're not interested in significant change. They're interested in tiny little changes, because you get those people who are like, oh, I'm a success, thus it can't be the system that we need to change. It's just people that need to change. They need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. He's very much against that. I think a final one that I'll talk about is schooling. In that, especially in I can't say about schooling because I just don't pay attention to it, but the practice of having police officers in schools, apparently for safety. But as Desmond Cole often goes back to, it's like, well, whose safety are we talking about here? We're talking about white safety. What makes white people feel safe? Because if you he claims, and it seems pretty valid to me, that if you talk about people of color, indigenous people, if you talk about how they feel about having a cop in the school, they say it's not great because these cops are trained to say, oh, there's a person of color. I'm gonna statistically, you can see that they stop and question, and if there's an interaction, it's going to go a lot more negatively, partially because of the cops' attitude, partially because of understandably how the people of color know how these situations go. They tense up. So bringing cops into the school where something where you might have an interaction where you have a teenager who's being surly. If that was a teacher, if that was a principal, it'd be like, yeah, okay, you're gonna you got detention or whatever, go to the office or whatever. But if you have a cop, guess what? A cop it's like, it's not that cops are evil and racist. It's that cops have a certain set of skills and they have a certain way of dealing with things. It's like a structural thing of how you train a police officer to react in situations. And it becomes a much bigger deal if some citizen starts talking back at them if they don't comply with with what you've told them to do. If that happened to a principal, it'd be like, well, you're expelled, or something. But it's not, I'm going to taser you, I'm going to handcuff you and take you away. And if you try and I'm going to try and physically interact with you and you react and you punch me, well, then suddenly it's assault against an officer, and suddenly this kid who should have just gotten to detention or whatever, or gotten expelled, is suddenly in the system with a conviction. So it's like, it is not for safety. It is not for, it becomes a thing of this. It's a system that doesn't seem to be so much for, oh, cops are going to get to know the kids, and then therefore the kids will know that these are guys, the police are there to help you. It's like, no, what their experience is that the cops who are stopping them repeatedly when they're just out and about and harassing you that way now get to be in the school system doing the same thing, and maybe introducing you to it even earlier. Of, this is the system of control that we have in Canadian society, and it is all about making white people feel safe, and about how we're wielding this power. It's a real power thing, which I think of a lot of the stuff in there that was like, oh, I'd never particularly thought about it that way before. And I mean, when I have an interaction with a cop, I sort of know, it's like, okay, yes sir, no sir, don't cause any trouble, da just try and keep it as light as possible. But the thing is, when a cop comes looking at a white guy like me, unless I'm acting really wild or something like that, they're going to be they're not going to come with it thinking that, oh, okay, this is somebody I might have to shoot immediately when I see the on first sight, because, oh God, that's one of the big things also in here, is a constant theme of mental illness, and the really lethal combination of mental illness and being a person of color at the same time. That's so dangerous in a way that, I mean, it's dangerous if you're not a person of color and you've got, because it goes down to it again. Police have a certain range of responses, and you very quickly get into a response that means death or horrendous injury to a police officer. And I mean, we can also go into this. The other thing in here, of course, is the culture of police, which is, it's a brotherhood. And I guess sisterhood, and they want to protect their own. And that instinct is a natural one. It's a structural one. This is a created group, have a shared experience, and they're going to protect their own, and not having independent actors outside of that group who can actually go in and have authority and um, com- compel proper evidence be given, is it's a rotten heart of our policing system. We can talk about defunding police, and we can talk about how police need to have less power. I mean, they're I would not want to be a police officer. You get to see people in their worst, having their worst day every single day. So I commented on this book in a video, on a public video, because this is just going to be private. This is just a white guy talking. You don't need to release this video out loud, out to everybody else. But I talked about this very briefly in a video, public video, and I probably lost a couple of subscribers. And I wonder if a part of it was is I just I didn't get into particular nuance, or people felt attacked, which I think white people are going to feel attacked. We are the beneficiaries of this system. I am the beneficiary of this system, and but it's not going. It needs to change. And someone like Desmond Cole is someone I'm really happy is around to say, hey, fuckers, you are in Canada is a really morally bad place, and we are treating people like shit, and we are devaluing them, and we are just structurally setting things up so that a white majority can feel comfortable, and leave all these other groups out in the fucking cold. And it is a moral disgrace. It is a yeah yeah it's and it's I don't think it's because Canada is particularly more the individuals in Canada are more racist than others, but I think we have a history, and we have systems set up that channel things in a really in a racist way, structural racism. And this is the skin we're in. So how do we make things better? I don't think we're going to make things perfect. There's no such thing as perfection, but I think you can. There's ways, and very concrete demands that Cole talks about when there's talking about resistance, Black resistance in here, where they have very specific demands. This is what we want. We don't want your pity. We don't want you to feel bad. We don't want you to have white tears. It's like, no, we have a certain list of, we have these lists of demands for these particular situations. Listen to them. And if you're not going to do them, why? What are your reasons not to? And if you can say something that isn't, well, that would just make me feel uncomfortable. It's like, well, why would that make you feel uncomfortable? We need to kind of dig in there and think about all that. So yeah, that is The Skn W'r In, A Year of Black Resistance and Power by Desmond Cole, which, this is my review. This is for me kind of just thinking things through myself. I don't need to particularly share this with a whole big, well, not with the 14 people who would actually watch me yak about it. But yeah, I just wanted to work it out for myself. So now I'm going to go make dinner. All right, more videos later.